have a good news story.
Oh, good. Good. Please. Yes, please. Go
Yeah,
for
well,
it.
we have a couple. We'll just do them. We'll do them
Good.
quickly. But the first one is that U.S. public support for Israel has plunged to an all-time low. And I know
Excellent.
this will put a smile on everyone's face, but there's the headline from the New York Times: American support for Israel dramatically declines, Times Siena poll finds. So this is a New York Times poll, and I dug into the numbers in the tables that they provided the poll, and I'll just give you some of the headlines. 56% of registered voters polled here disapprove of Trump's handling of the what they call the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, including 40% who strongly disapprove. Only 36% of registered voters approve. There is a clear age gap throughout this. Among 18 to 29-year-olds, 73% disapprove and 53% strongly disapprove. Only 21% in that age group approve of Trump's handling of the situation. Another really important number here: 51%, so that's more than half of registered voters, disapprove of sending additional economic and military aid to Israel. So that's a sea change. I mean, I can't overstate how big a sea change that is for those of us who've been watching this over many years. And that includes 35% who strongly disapprove of sending more economic and military aid to Israel. There is a strong partisan divide. 73% of Democrats oppose sending additional economic and military aid to Israel, but 71% of Republicans approve. But just look at that Democrat number. Do you see Democratic Party leaders reflecting that in their policies and their positions and statements? They ought to change the name to the Undemocratic Party, because that's what they are. Now, some other really incredible, I have never seen numbers like this. I'm not sure if you can see that on the screen. No need to. I dug through it for you, but it's in
Thank
the
you.
New York Times if you want to study it. But I've never seen a number like this. They asked, in the dispute between Israel and the Palestinians, which side do you sympathize with more, Israel or the Palestinians? Every single poll I have seen for the last 30 years that I've been watching this, a far larger number sympathize with Israel and only a minority sympathize with Palestinians. Well, now in this New York Times poll, 34% sympathize more with Israel and 35% sympathize more with Palestinians. So that's, you could say, statistically equal, but with Palestinians slightly ahead. I have never seen that before. And then you have about 20% saying both sides. They're not willing to take a position, or, so that's a sea change.
Yeah.
And then some other incredible numbers. They ask people whether they agree or disagree with these statements. So one statement is Israel should stop its military campaign in order to protect against civilian casualties, even if not all Israeli hostages have been released. 58% of registered voters agreed with that statement, a very clear majority. And then they asked, Israel should continue its military campaign until all hostages are released, even if it means civilian casualties in Gaza might continue. 30% agree with that. So by 60 to 30, Americans want to see an end to this genocide. Of course, the New York Times doesn't use the word genocide, but still, Americans want an end to this.
Yeah.
Then they ask, this was incredible, is Israel taking enough precautions to avoid civilian casualties? Only 25% agreed with that. And then, is Israel not taking enough precautions to avoid civilian casualties? 62% agreed with that. So 62% of registered voters agreed that Israel is not doing enough to prevent civilian casualties. So the Israeli propaganda that claims we're the most, no army does more than we do, to protect civilians, nobody's buying it. 62% of Americans reject that. And then of that 62%, 40% say Israel is deliberately, intentionally targeting civilians, and just 16% say it is unintentional. So the American public understands that Israel is a brutal, sadistic, murderous state that is deliberately targeting civilians. That is an absolute sea change. And I don't think the stitch up of getting pro-Israel Oracle billionaire Larry Ellison, who is also a big funder of Tony Blair, getting him to buy TikTok is going to turn this around anytime soon.
Thank you for leaving us on that high note, Ali. Let's take a look at
just one more thing,
yeah,
Nora, just a very quick update.
Yeah.
I don't want people to miss this, but earlier this week, a U.S. federal judge ruled that the Trump administration unlawfully targeted pro-Palestine student activists with deportation to silence criticism of Israel violating their right to free speech. I'm reading from this Al Jazeera report by Ali Harb. And he says, in a blistering opinion on Tuesday, federal district judge William Young, an appointee of former President Ronald Reagan, said Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Secretary of Homeland Security Kirsty Noem misused their powers in the deportation campaign. Quote, they did so in order to strike fear into similarly situated non-citizen pro-Palestinian individuals, proactively and effectively curbing lawful pro-Palestinian speech and intentionally denying such individuals the freedom of speech that is their right. The judge, William Young, wrote.
That's huge.
It is huge. It's really huge.
Yeah, because the U.S. has been wanting to deport Mahmoud Khalil, for example, after imprisoning him in an ICE detention camp for 3 months. But yeah, and so that, we have to keep it up. I mean, right now, college campuses, administrations here in my, hometown of Berkeley, California, the chancellor of UC Berkeley just handed over the names of, I think, more than 150 students who have been involved in Palestine rights organizing on campus. He just handed them over to the Trump administration. Now we see, I think Cornell University has just fired a professor for pointing out that an Israeli spy who has history with the Unit 8200 intelligence services was secretly recording a class of his. And when this professor, who happens to be Jewish, but that shouldn't matter, pointed it out to the administration, I believe his classes were canceled just to protect this Israeli spy. I mean, this is the capitulation and the cowardice in these, levels, in these institutions of higher education, especially.
The citadels of academic freedom and free
exactly.
speech.
Just they can't help but fall over themselves, capitulating over and over again to the demands of not just the federal government to suppress student speech and organizing and critical thought and academic freedom, but also, to their donors and the Israel lobby groups that are pressuring them. These people are cowards, but I think more than ever, students and faculty of conscience are continuing to stick up for their rights. And so let's keep an eye on that, of course. But that is really good news about the judge ruling for once.